Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the State Building Code Council Executive Committee for Friday, March 7th, 2025. And let's start with roll. We have a couple people here, please.
All right, let me pop up my participants list real quick just so I can check the room. All right, Council Chair Todd Bayreuther,
Here.
Council Vice Chair Jay Arnold, MVPE Committee Chair Damon Doyle. I'm not seeing in the room. BFRW Committee Chair Roger Haringa, and he let us know he would not be available today. And Legislative Committee Chair Tom Handy. And I'm not seeing him in the room today, but with that, we still maintain quorum with the seats we have.
Okay. There's just two of us, you mean?
There's three. We have Utah, Jay, or I'm sorry, I accidentally marked Damon is here. So no,
Oh,
we
okay.
don't have quorum. My bad.
Okay. So if Damon just, because we know Roger and Tom, I don't think can make it today, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll proceed without taking any action and start moving through the agenda. Anyone from the public like to be recognized? It's a pretty short list today. I think we see everyone, so. Okay, well, we won't obviously then approve the agenda until we see Damon jump on. But we can move into public comments that are, or approve the minutes. But we can move into
The
public comment. Go ahead.
the minutes aren't quite ready yet, so
Yep,
it's just still on there. We hope to get them done by the time this was getting out, but it didn't quite happen. And
no
so
worries.
on to number 4 there.
Okay, would anyone like to make a comment for an item's not on the agenda? Well, we might be very efficient today. Um, we with the tag appointments, we obviously can't take action unless Damon jumps on. Um, Dustin, do you want to maybe give us a quick update though on the applications we have received and just get
Yes, I
everybody?
certainly can. Let me share my screen and get
And as
this.
you're doing that, just to remind everyone, so I think it was last year sometime the council took action to change our bylaws to allow either the full council, which we've done, and we did a couple of meetings ago, started to fill the group 2 tags, um, and then or the executive committee. So we're trying to fill in the committees. We're bringing it up at the executive committee to try to do some of this outside, or not outside, but more consent agenda. Well,
So what we have
go
here
ahead.
is the group 2 posting sheet. We have received 5 applications since the last time we made some appointments. So I have an application by Joshua Mergens to be the primary structural engineer on the IRC tag. Um, in the single exit multiplex housing tag. I received another application for an architect, Sherry Newbold. Both of the architect roles are filled already. And in review of the application, I didn't see a good place that she could be slotted in to fill in some other roles. But I'll leave that open for discussion. And then I also have an application from Mike Messer for a fire official from counties with nobody currently in that role. So he would be recommended for the primary. Within the Wildland Urban Interface Code tag, I received a application from Jared Harms for fire marshal. He would be recommended for the alternate. I received an application from Greg Rogers for fire chief, and we have a primary there, and he would be recommended for the alternate as well. And then we have a Jonathan Goldsmith with an application slotted in at the general public subject matter expert seat, and we have a primary there, and so we recommend him for the alternate. And then I have Greg Rogers also wished to be, if there was room slotted in on the International Fire Code tag seat as a fire official / fire marshal. And since we have a primary there, made a recommendation for the alternate. And so that is all I have for the application since the last time. If we get more applicants, next time you see this type of sheet, it'll have all the tags on it. That way we can see all the rostering that's going on there. And we're working towards updating our technical advisory group page on the website. There's some confusion on the links there, but if I was going to give anybody direction, I would ask them to go to the 2024 code adoption cycle tab, and there at the top of that page is a new link for the tag pages. This one goes back to a page that needs some updates, but we do have the current full roster of tags located there. And so here in the next week or so, we're really working hard to try to get that part of our website updated. We realize there's lots of changes to the website that need to occur, and we're trying to get the most relevant ones taken care of first. And this is the one that we've been getting some questions on most lately, so we're working to get that updated. And that's all I have for you for this one without
Okay.
some action.
Okay, I think it was good to just keep going through this and Angela's I see here too. I think what we'll do is we'll obviously bring this to the full council then in 2 weeks. And I think what I and others can do, we can work with the and get the chair recommendations. We'll get more applications in and then get the chair recommendation filled in so that when we bring it to the council, we have everything prepped and have kind of short discussions. And if any of the council wants to weigh in and like we did last time and propose changes, we can do that. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got I did get to Jonathan Goldsmith to submit for the WUI tag. He does have an emergency management background. He does do earthquake evaluation, post-earthquake evaluation, but he's one of our assistant deputy officials for Spokane. So we could consider him for that position. And what I've noticed, and I've made an effort to try and get some of these other positions filled, there's just nobody that's interested in participating on this. I'm basically begging the council to reconsider the positions to fill with positions of people who are interested in this rather than trying to fill the specific needs, what we felt that this should be. I would recommend potentially having either building officials or fire officials from east and west. And I think that would help bolster this up because I just don't think we're going to fill these other positions. We just don't seem to have anybody that's interested.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting comment, Dave. If we were to do something like propose something like that, then that could be at the full council meeting. So
yeah.
We do have Damon here now, so maybe we can talk about this a little more and try to tee this up. I have a question for everyone here. I had a potential applicant from the cities and counties planning, and this one just says planning. And if you remember on the single exit, I advocated to have actual capital P planner, someone who's licensed, so forth, and we found a good applicant. This person is a member of a planning commission. Does anyone have concern over that filling slot 12?
No, that looks like the description to me.
Okay. I thought it'd be a great qualification, but I just wanted to raise it and advise that person to apply then. Okay, well, welcome, Damon. You put us over, I think, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we've established quorum. Let's just continue on this topic here. Micah, go ahead, please.
I got to pause for a moment.
And we lost quorum. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to vote on anything, but the positions for the WUI tag, we may want to look at the legislation that's going through. There is some maybe newly named, but some named groups that we're supposed to coordinate with or should coordinate with when developing the codes. So maybe some of the positions can shift and we can do some different outreach. I mean, they're not far off from what we've got, but that should possibly be a consideration. I do believe that bill is going to get passed, and so maybe we want to coordinate the tag with the requirements or suggestions in that legislation.
What bill are you talking about, Micah?
That's the
HB
Bill
1254.
1254.
Oh, the WUI code tag. I mean, the WUI bill.
Yeah,
The big one.
yeah.
Okay.
In the is it section 2 of the bill, it talks about that the SBCC should coordinate with building officials, which we already got, but urban forestry specialists to consider up-to-date wildfire science to create regionally appropriate building codes. So maybe there's some fire science folks, maybe there's some, forestry folks that we would like to have. I mean, that doesn't have to be somebody from the Department of Natural Resources, but maybe we just need to look to that bill to try to fill some slots.
Yeah.
Dave
Well,
not suggested some adjustments there. Thanks.
I'll tell you what, Jay, we'll hear from you in a second here. We did put this on the agenda today as item 7, I remember now. So we can probably circle back and have a deeper discussion if the WUI is the main consideration. Because I don't think we're talking about any of the other tags at this point. So, okay, go ahead, Jay, please.
To your comment previously, Todd, I'm curious on whether the committee, the tag chairs have been able to look at these and have any recommendations, since with Damon here, we might actually be taking action.
Oh, okay, now we can. Yeah. The answer to that question, Jay, is we did with the applicants that were there was that BRFW? Does anyone remember, Dustin? Didn't we had Katie and Angela, you're on now too. We talked a little bit, but there are new applicants now, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, I didn't get back to Dustin, but I was fine with, I think there was one new one for the IRC that on the email you sent out yesterday or the day before. So yeah, I was fine with it.
Okay. Well, okay. So now resetting, now that we have quorum, if Damon's off his call, there you go. I see you now. Well, maybe not. But we have quorum. So Angela, should we go back to IRC? And it was Josh, right?
Yes.
And then Angela, you're saying you
Yeah.
are okay with that recommendation.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay. Dustin, is that yeah, it's a Word doc. Are you able to copy that
Yeah,
over?
I can
Okay. And yes, we know Josh, and I think he was on the IBC, right?
yes, sir.
Yep. He did a great job there.
I'm
Okay.
back.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm just giving you a hard time. Okay. Do you want to take
Mr.
action
Chair,
on that?
I'll move that we approve Joshua Mergens for the RSC tag.
Okay.
Second.
I saw your head nod, Damon. Thanks you. So it's moved and seconded to add Joshua to the Mergens to the IRC tag. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Josh is added. And then Dustin, do we have any other on the single exit?
We have
Right.
Messer for the single exit multiplex housing tag.
And we don't remember if Roger had a look at that.
He had looked at it, but I didn't get a specific recommendation
Oh.
from him before he left.
Let's just take time then, because we're gonna get a few more applicants for this one. And then anything else then? Any other tag?
Yes. So we have the WUI code tag seats for Jared Harms, Greg Rogers, and Jonathan Goldsmith. And we had Dave Colcott speaking in favor of potentially moving Jonathan up to the emergency management slot as a primary.
Okay, but we don't have Katie here.
Yeah, Katie and Pete, they saw this, but I didn't get any specific email back from them as part of the discussion that we were having.
Well, okay, we just didn't get ahead of that one, so let's be respectful of their roles there, and we'll bring it to the full council. Okay,
And
then
just
Dave,
for
go ahead.
For clarity, I was going to say that both the single exit multiplex housing and the WUI code tag not anticipated to start before our council meeting this month.
Correct. Okay, and then we'll bring back the discussion on WUI at item 7 here. Anything else? Any other tag? The energy residentials?
Can I make a suggestion?
Of course.
Dustin, could you reach out to your cohorts, and if you scroll back up for a second, boy, a DNR rep that actually knew what was going on would be a very valuable spot on this tag. I mean, due to our, the overlapping responsibilities. So yeah, I would really hope that we get somebody worthwhile from DNR to participate.
it's a good point, Damon. And Dustin, maybe you had the privilege of sitting in that meeting with Representative Dewar. Now that's on the legislation, but the representatives from the agency were outstanding and the DNR and so forth. So maybe we do need to reach out to and start with that list that was in that stakeholder meeting with Representative Dewar.
Yes, I can definitely make that reach out.
Okay. Good suggestion. Okay. Anything else? Any other tags?
We had the fire code tag for Greg Rogers as an alternate for the fire official, fire marshal.
But we haven't heard from Dan.
No, sir.
Okay. So that's our task. We'll get ahead of it for the council meeting. Okay. We have reviewed, so we will move on from tag appointments. Let's circle back to the agenda. So agenda item 2 is review and approve the agenda. Can we hear a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Okay. I heard Damon and then Jay. Will pull it back up just to make sure everybody stacks hands on what we're looking at. Dustin, do you have the agenda?
Yeah, one moment.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve this agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. Item 3 is review and approve the minutes. We're not ready. We discussed that. So we did 4, we did 5. Now we're gonna go into agenda item 6, which is an update on the overall code cycle. And I know I'm talking fast, Dustin, so we'll give you a second to catch up.
All right. So first, as part of this one, I wanted to give an update on where the existing amendments and significant changes reports are. So for the energy code residential, that one's already ready and working within the tag. The IRC reports, I would put them at about 50% complete. One of the changes that staff is doing this time around versus the group 1 codes is we're completing the framework of the report so that tag members don't have to do that draft work. It proved to be a little bit cumbersome to separate all the material, distribute it to volunteers for certain chapters, have them actually draft it all the same way, bring it back in, put it back together, and then present it as a report for the tag to recommend to the committee. Once it was out of the tag, it moved pretty fast, but the draft work was a bit of a administrative nightmare for our staff to get everything going. I really appreciate the tag's input on them at the group 1 stage, but I'm thinking this is going to be a easier process for everybody to take the product and push back out. So staff is, excuse me, in the same format that we had for the group 1 codes. We are putting all the state amendments into a spreadsheet. We're making identifying where the code sections are, if the amendments are still relevant. And one of the big tasks there is tracking down the rationale for when the amendment was created. So it's easy to track back through the WSR documents as far as a process for one single amendment, but to do it for every single amendment becomes a little bit hard to track down that history. And so I myself am currently working with the IRC documents. We do have a new staffer. Haven't had an opportunity to introduce them. I did not ask them to come to this meeting here today because I want them to keep on working with the UPC reports. But their name is Brandon Grote, and as we get ready to embark on the tag work within these reports, we'll make an introduction of Brandon here. I'm planning at the March meeting, and then we'll be coordinating with him to work with the tag chairs to get the work done for the UPC. I envision Brandon working with the UPC and the WUI code for group 2. I'll still steward the IRC and any other code making projects that we have going on outside of UPC and WUI code. And so that's pretty much where we are with the reports. They're not quite ready. And that brings me to the next topic of our cycle update, which is the adoption schedule. As we didn't make the marks, or I'll pause there. Micah, you want to comment?
Just a question. You indicated that the residential energy code significant changes report was possibly done. Not relevant, but when you have these done, could you let us know where you're going to be posting those,
Yes.
please?
And I should also comment that the energy codes don't do significant changes and existing amendment reports. They do an integrated draft. And that's because the energy code, we have a Washington State Energy Code, and we compare it to the International Energy Conservation Code and bring changes from the ICC document to the Washington document. Whereas when we do it with all the other codes, we take the Washington amendments and bring it to the ICC document and compare that way. And so it's a little bit of a reversal in the data flow there. Damon?
Thank you. That was a great preface to my question. This kind of caught me by surprise over the last week or so. I was unable to attend the first Energy Code residential meeting because of a conflict with the national meeting. Why do we treat, yet again, the Energy Code different than everything else? It's our only tag that's more than 15 members. We have a process where we take model codes and apply Washington amendments. And the fact that we're not doing that, I'm kind of surprised I didn't know, but yeah, is there a reason behind that? Is there a logical reason for making it so out of sequence?
As far as a reasoning, I don't have a solid answer for you. The reason why it's run a little different for the energy codes, since my joining with SBCC, that was the status quo when I arrived on scene, and so I haven't envisioned that. And so I heard your comment at yesterday's meeting asking why this doesn't happen. I did jump into the RCW and our 5104 process for looking at why, and there's no mention of the way we're doing it for the energy code within those that verbiage there. And so I don't have an answer for this is the reason why we do it, only that is how it has been done. And I think that's been just the status quo. So if there's room to improve the process and change it so that we're doing that, I'm all for making those changes. But as we're sitting right now, I'm not sure if we're in a position to pivot.
Okay, and the reason I think that it's important is it's the code that gets us in the most trouble. So let's try to stay out of trouble. B, let's simplify the process. I mean, we're all volunteers. As you can see, I'm trying to work and do this at the same time like everyone else. If we can do anything to streamline that, that's to the benefit of the whole council, and not just this council, but councils going forward. And to have one code that just gets done completely differently is kind of puzzling to me. So Mr. Chair, I would like to see that as an objective for us to try to streamline the process and bring everything into done the same. So just an observation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a comment question, but let's go to Micah and Jay first.
Thanks. Great question, Damon. I've asked this one before. I think even before Dustin was here, like the comment or information that I received was that the Washington Energy Code is so far beyond and different from the IECC, even though it brings in a lot of the same components, and which of course brings in a lot of the ASHRAE 90.1 items. But because we're so different, it's not something we start with. On top of that, when we look at RCW 1927A.020, it does state that the Washington State Energy Code for residential buildings, and I know that's what you primarily work on, I believe, shall be the 2006 edition of the Washington State Energy Code. It's not required to be starting out with the International Energy Code. In addition to that, there is in that same RCW that the State Building Code Council shall evaluate and consider adoption of the IECC in place of the Washington State Energy Code. But my understanding is that's where it stems from, is we're just so much different than IECC. Also, although we bring many components of it over, And so therefore we usually start with the Washington Energy Code and based on that RCW as well. So hopefully that gives you some answers, and maybe Dustin doesn't have to do so much homework. Thanks.
And it does. And I, like you, I've been involved in the code process for a long time, going back to '09. And of course, gosh, we had energy code and a state energy office back in the early 90s. So we're well ahead of the rest of the country. But the intent was always to get closer and closer to the IECC. And quite frankly, if you now look at the format of our code as far as chapters and how they're numbered, we're almost there. So let's get over the hump. Let's get there and not have this crazy standalone code that gets us in trouble.
Okay, thank you. Jay, go ahead, please.
Well, of course, Micah made the points I wanted to make with references off the top of his head that just continue to amaze me. I would add to that for the energy code, we've got the mandate from the legislature on energy efficiency goals and compliance with Initiative 2066, which are unique requirements for Washington State. And so I think that's another reason why it's a separate process. But concur with Damon on saying, how do we go streamline this process as much as possible? Because yes, everybody's a volunteer, and we rely on a lot of those volunteer expertise. Thank you.
If I could respond,
Yeah, of course.
the IECC objectives, I had the privilege of meeting with several ICC staff as well as the president and their executive director last week. Their goal with the energy code is very, very similar now to our 70% reduction. That's from Senate Bill 5456 of 2009. So we're both going the same path. Cool. And then 2066, if there's a document that is in full compliance, it's the 2024 IECC. It is completely fuel blind. So seems to me it would achieve both our legislative objective and keep us out of trouble with EPCA and initiatives. So thank you.
Thank you. The question I was going to raise to everyone that I think I raised in a private conversation this week with Damon, however we got here, is it true that the energy code or codes are the only ones that we fully publish as WACs because they have, so is it partially that everything is written into WAC, so it takes rulemaking to change it?
I would say that is the only one that we fully publish like that, and yes, would require rulemaking to change it.
Whereas the other ones, I had to wrap my head around this last week with a challenge to a previous petition. The other ones, there is, I think in RCW, but also in the WAC, then we adopt the most recent version of the model codes and then overlay them and edit with that which is published in WAC, and then the petitions are against the actual WACs or the model code. So okay, whereas this one, everything's in WAC. You're always changing the WAC. So okay, let me know if that's not correct.
Kind of wacky.
It's kind of wacky. Thank you.
That was very cool.
Yeah. So before we move on from that, though, go ahead, Micah. And I want to ask Angela questions if you're still around. Go ahead, Micah.
I think the I code as the base starting point is also an RCW 1927-031, Todd, for the rest of the codes.
Say that one more time to Jay's point. You're rattling these off.
I said
Very effectively.
1927-031. It is
Yeah, there's an RCW saying that says we shall, right? It was mandated to do that.
Yeah, that requires you to start with the most recent versions of the model codes, and that is not this. You are correct. That does not exist. I think Jay mentioned that in RCW 1927A, the same way. So,
and then I just don't remember in the WACs, and when we go chapter by chapter, I don't. Anyway, yeah, the mandate is there in RCW, regardless of how, and then they're listed in. I just don't remember in the WACs if they're listed somewhere that, because I know when you adopt the WAC, you say we are now on IBC 2024, right? That's part of the rulemaking process to say we're on that version and here are all the other amendments to that version. So there you go. 2021 edition, that gets updated rewritten every time. Okay, go ahead, Damon.
One of the things that was passed yesterday at the residential tag was to adopt the 2024 IECC unamended as one of the documents we start with. So whereas the WAC may not direct us to use the model IECC as the base document, does it therefore also prohibit us from doing that?
And just to correct, I think correct you there, you meant RCW.
Yes,
direct
I'm
us.
sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think so.
Okay, Mike is shaking his head as well. So, okay, just curious.
So are you asking in those petitions, which are basically strikers, you're saying that that is a fair question?
Yeah, it was one of the last motions that passed. I looked out my window and saw pigs fly by. It was to consider just adopting the 2024 IECC in its entirety. So I don't know what that means, but that was a tag proposal that was accepted. So
it's a big question, but that comes back to just like on the source versus site, like where is the appropriate place to ask that question? And it seems that maybe a petition is the right place. So, okay. Angela, if you'll entertain me, please. So on this first bullet point we're talking about here, since the IRC would be, one of the codes that would consider that, what do you have thoughts on what Dustin presented as on how to approach the significant changes and the existing amendment report?
This is my first time chairing a committee, and I haven't been on one since I think the 2015 code. So, and it was very different. So whatever he thinks will be easiest for staff. And I mean, if there's anything I can do to help to organize or whatever, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. Because I had to go through on a challenge to a petition this week and try to explain the best I could to the person with the concern, how they weren't following how this works, where when the model code comes in, then we have to start with comparing the model code with the existing amendments from the previous cycle. And then, and then of course the tag is going to weigh in and say, that substantially changes, that should be a petition, or the other model code now addresses what the Washington Amendment did. And so I think the confusion was from the outside was once that determination is made to, pick the new model code or the existing Washington Amendment, that's just the starting point that then is petitioned against. And if I misunderstand that or not communicating that correctly, let me know. But like in this case, it was the tag recommended to keep the existing condition, the existing amendment from the previous cycle rather than adopt the new model code. And that was the thing that was put out publicly then for people to petition amendments against. And that's the process. And I think what Dustin, you're saying is you think we can go faster by having the staff make their professional recommendation, still pass it through the tag for consideration. And of course, then that existing amendment report comes up to the council and the council has to accept it. And then that becomes the thing that's published. And then the petition window opens after that.
Yes, so a lot of the work that we're doing to create what we're working out to distribute to the tag was done essentially twice in the group one version of the 2024 code cycle, where we have the Word documents that we're working with. We chopped them up into small pieces so they could be distributed a little easier. The technical advisory group members then took that and a blank framework for inserting the amendments and commentary and things that needed to go into this report. And they did a wonderful job of getting the information. But then when we got it all back, the formatting of each person, we try to give pretty clear direction, and it's just no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. Not that the tag members were the enemy, but we struggled after we got all that stuff back to put it back together and make it all look like it wasn't just cobbled together from multiple documents. And so that amount of time there, we lost 2 months in our schedule as a result of the work going there. Right now, we're about a month behind what was the most recently proposed schedule. And I still think that we can make some time up as we do this, but I'd like to try to avoid the hassle of re-putting things back together if we can get this done as one big document and go over it as a tag and not necessarily need to seek volunteers to just draft the document. And so we're staff has taken on that burden, and it's a lot of work at the moment, but it is I think it'll be beneficial in the end.
Crowdsourcing still takes 70% of the effort by the organizer. So, okay, Angela, go ahead.
So am I understanding that staff is then going to be reviewing the significant changes and giving their opinion on yay or nay on those?
That is that has been the status quo in the past. So the
Okay.
staff is giving their opinion on whether or not an existing amendment should remain in
Right.
relation to the 2024 code, and also as we go through the significant changes, we will be given a staff opinion on the adoption or modification. Most of those will probably, as long as they're not affecting existing amendments, I'm anticipating, at least for the IRC, we're still working with the UPC. That's about 80% done. And I would wager that most of those changes in the model code language not affecting amended sections will be recommended for inclusion, and hopefully proposals to change them will come in if there's something as a need for Washington State.
Okay, thanks. Sounds good.
So basically, Dustin, you're still going to go back to the tag. Staff will have the recommendation and things flagged in coordination with the chair tag. We'll be very aware of the things that probably need discussion, and then hopefully streamline everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone, any other comments or opposed to that concept? Still gives a lot of freedom to the chair to help define that process. Okay, Dustin, go ahead. I think you're on bullet point 2 now, adoption schedule.
Yes. So our adoption schedule, we've touched a little bit on this one. We lost some time in the group 1 codes due to report drafting. We are struggling right now with the most up-to-date schedule that's posted online. This is the schedule that is linked on our 2024 adoption page. What I'd like to point out is in the group 2 codes, which initially was intended to include the residential energy code as well. We had wanted to draft the tag reports within the period that we're sitting in right now, which is this bar right here. And we have our committee meeting, which would be next week, and a council meeting the week after. And the reports are not complete. The tag has not had a chance to review them. And so speaking with Todd about where we're at and trying to get these out, I'm asking to get one more month on these and push the committee meeting that's here out to the April committee meeting and council meeting, and push all this down. So the proposed shifts that I've got here essentially shift the tag work start dates and compress the amendment review time for us. We can't compress towards the end of this cycle out here. This section of this cycle is really crafted to comply with the minimum timelines of the Administrative Procedures Act. And so, and also trying to utilize the regularly scheduled meetings of the council. So you'll see some gaps in here where we have a hearing and it occurs after a October council meeting. And so, or I'll stop naming dates there, but just because of some of these gaps in here where the lines don't line up just right, are due to trying to adhere to the normal meetings that we have scheduled. If we start moving around this schedule much more, we'll start needing special meetings. We will see also here at the end when we first talked about the schedule and our goal, our target ending being mid-November, which gives us about 2 weeks of extra time to push through till December. So December 1 is our do or die adoption date for all codes except for the commercial energy code. The commercial energy code needs to be final adopted by December 15th. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for wiggling around in there for stuff to happen. So I want to avoid getting more waylaid by trying to parse out the work for the reports. Currently, we can't reduce our amendment petition submission window that is set by our policies for amendment or code update. We could potentially start working the tags within the petition window, but without directing those petitions back down to the tag from the council, we can't take any official action. This was a method used for the group one where we opened the petition window for 90 days instead of 60 days and got the tag working a little bit ahead of that. And then the council directed those petitions back down. So I'm about to pull up the proposed schedule, which was posted for today's meeting. This one shows shifting essentially 2 or 3 blocks on most of these lines here until we get to this section. And our review of the petitions to the tags is gonna have to occur on a condensed time scale. So concerns for that movement in this schedule for me are one, we struggle to get tag membership due to concerns on the commitment level of those members. So a 2-hour meeting once or twice a week is already kind of balked at. And if we continue to convene meetings for longer time periods on more frequent cadences, I'm not sure that everybody's going to be able to attend such a long meeting and get the work done. So I have concerns with trying to condense here, but I don't see another place to actually condense that. So there is a necessity at the moment to hold long tag meetings to accomplish the work within the time frame that we have remaining. A discussion point of what happens if we don't make it by December 1 or December 15th arises at that point. If we don't make the adoption date of December 1, we are out of sync with statutory requirement. And it's not that the codes couldn't sit through a legislative session. It's just that that's our deadline in the statute. If we weren't done by December 31st or by the start of the legislative session for 2026, then we wouldn't have the benefit of the code sitting through that legislative session. And at that point, I believe, are looking at the 2024 codes being delayed an entire year. As I am working to get this process to be more solvent for public scrutiny and to work with what we're doing. Looking back as we do these significant amendment or significant change in existing amendment reports, and we're tracking down the rationale for the creation of the amendments, it is plainly apparent that there are more amendments to the code occurring now than did in the past. And staffing levels aren't changing and our time periods aren't changing. If we delay a year, I see it as being a problem for the 2027 code cycle. 2026 is intended to be a publication year where we're working on publications, getting things ready for local jurisdictions to use, addressing potential errata items and stuff like that. Actually, I should rewind that comment on errata items. We do have ability to do an interim code cycle, which occurs 12 months after the effective date of the code and must complete 18 months after that effective date. So that's another consideration right now. Nobody has been talking about this potential work for the SBCC. The codes went into effect March 15th of 2024. March 15th is upon us. If we wanted to start an interim update cycle, I don't know how we could absorb the work. That is the main reason I have not brought it up. is that we are not well positioned in staff to take on that work. And so I guess as we're talking about the schedule, we have to consider that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We're trying to catch it up by December 1 so that we can be well provisioned and positioned for the 2027 cycle. The 2026 year, I would envision that being a year where we are also prepping the documents and other things that we need to begin the work right at the beginning of this 3-year cycle. And we're not pushing out until the end of legislative session. And hopefully we're not still wrangling a bunch of lawsuits and potential updates and complete revisions to certain codes and delaying the codes for other reasons other than not meeting our timelines. So I'll bring up the revised document here, and I'm happy to entertain discussion or solutions to the issues.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Go ahead, Damon.
It's cool to look at Gantt charts. This is what I do all day long. Kind of a Gantt chart nonetheless.
Yes.
The WEI, the Work Group on Economic Impact, I know that we were potentially didn't do a good enough job the last code cycle. Where does that fit in here? Where are we doing the economic impact analysis on all these codes?
So for group 1, it's needs to start happening right now. As far as the group 2 codes and everything else, it is in the CR 102 preparation phase, which already, without showing you the new update, which is where it's going to get shorter, we don't have a ton of time for economic impact analysis for the stuff we've got going in group 2. And as far as looking at contracts and getting that type of tack to take on the economic analysis, we're not in a great position due to spending freezes and things, but to do an RFI process and get a contract in place for economic analysis for all the codes, I see as being a super huge boon for scrutiny applied to the reports that we're putting out there. But the simple fact is that the process to get that in place won't necessarily complete until somewhere in the June, July timeframe. And then, we're just not in a position to have a contract for the group 2 codes or the group 1 codes for that matter in a timely fashion right now.
And I presume that your copy of this is in color.
There's no color copy. I did it in black and white so that we could so that it was the same no matter where we viewed it. So let me pull up the new version of this. I thought I opened it already.
My thinking I saw different shades of gray. Thought maybe it was a.
Well, I try to stay away from colors for ADA purposes.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the only thing I was thinking is that, you noted that some of those windows are fixed, can't be moved, and others are potentially flexible. It might be easier to interpret that if it were colored, but.
I gotcha.
Okay, go ahead,
I
Jay.
don't know why this is not opening up like I wanted.
Yeah. Just 2 suggestions, and they're minor given the scope of the challenges ahead of us. But as I remember, the requirement for code to sit through a legislative cycle only applies to the energy code. So if we needed to slide other codes beyond the December 1st deadline, we would need to prioritize the energy code. Secondly, we have a big window for submission for petitions. I recognize that folks are going to generally submit near the deadline, but if we do get petitions ahead of time, I would like to see if we could be set up for early action by the council to consider things as they come in and direct them to the tag that might allow the tag to jumpstart their work. Thanks.
I think that's a good suggestion. Micah, go ahead.
I'll jump in there. I'm not sure that's quite accurate, Jay. RCW 1927-074, item 5C. All decisions to adopt or amend codes of statewide application through a 3-year code cycle shall be made prior to December 1st of any year and shall not take effect before the end of the regular legislative session of the next year. So I don't believe that only applies to energy code. That should be all codes if I'm interpreting that accurately.
Okay, thank you, Micah.
Yep. And then I did have a question, Dustin. Are you going to show your updated schedule? And
Yeah.
Boy, this is going to be a tough one because it's so. Group 2 is so short. The tag meetings, your revised schedule is showing June 23rd through July 11th. Very, very condensed for tag review of proposals, including one of those is normally a holiday week for a lot of folks, end of school. This is a bad situation for us. So hopefully it'll work, but that is one thing I wanted to point out is that is a really small window. The public outreach time and time frame and involvement there, the things we had a lot of complaints on last cycle, I'm not sure we're going to capture that in a 3-week time frame. Actually, it's less than that. It's 21 days total, but business weeks.
So Micah, this group 2 cycle, we're going to discuss the WUI code separately. So set that aside. Energy codes are kind of on their own path right now. So we're mainly talking about the IRC, right? The other codes probably won't be that significant, but IRC should be the one we're concerned about, right?
That is probably the big one that we're still working on the reports for right now. Yes.
Okay. So I guess if we isolate that one out, is there a strategy? Remember, one of the reasons we pulled the legislative mandates into a special tag was to relieve that IRC tag a little bit. So that multiplex is a complex issue. So we're going to start that quickly. And that one doesn't have the existing amendments and significant changes considerations. So that one we just start. We open up a window and hopefully we can streamline and start reviewing as petitions come in, since the single exit, the primary submission's already in. We're going to open up for others, but okay. And then the WUI, so what on that question that Jay put out there, can you tell us a little more about the window? We have it for 60 days right now, and what's the requirement?
The requirement is 60 days per the WAC 5104.
Okay, per the WAC.
There is not without reviewing it, I don't think there's a 60-day window required in RCW.
Okay, but to the question of, can we start? If a petition comes in day 1, can we start on that petition, and knowing that there might be some correlation and so forth consideration? Go ahead, Angela.
So I think that's what we did with group 1A, whatever. And when the petitions come in, you can send them to the tag so that they can be discussed and things. You can't take any action until all of them are in, because you have to make sure that something else doesn't come in that is better or contradicts or something like that. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what the council decided with the last group was, as they come in, you can send them to the tag so that they can at least start reviewing them, mulling them over, and just with no action actually taken. And then that way, when you get to our whole 3 weeks that we have, a lot of discussion has already taken place, and maybe they can move a little swifter, especially if they don't have any, battling proposals. So, yeah.
Well, or you do have battling proposals. I think it's valuable that we start considering it in the petition window, because then that allows counter proposals and kind of working through this process, where instead of shutting it down and then only working on amending a petition. So it's much more of a legislative process, in my opinion, allows for that flexibility. But Micah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot on there, Angela. I feel for you. One thing that needs to also be reminded is the dwelling unit size legislative item that is part of the IRC tag, and that one.
Was it IRC or IBC? There's two of them, Micah. We were just talking about this, Dustin, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
the
don't remember.
IBC
but I
requirement of
did.
the small micro units or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that might be IBC tag. Don't ignore me.
Go ahead, Dustin. Dustin, can you remind us, please?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. So, in 1927042, we have the requirement to do work on temporary emergency shelters, targeting the IBC tag. We have the single exits multiplex housing within the ad hoc tag. And then we also have in 1927.801 dwelling unit size, and I believe that one is best for the IBC tag. Let's just hop it up to read it while we're talking about it.
And just the significance of that, everyone, is if it's the IBC tag, that's a separate tag. We're gonna bring that one's still sitting there where they've done their significant work on group one, but we could bring that back up, or we could task that to the ad hoc if needed. But I think the IBC is the most appropriate there. Yep, it's very specific. Okay. Minimum dwelling unit size. Okay. Why is the shelter one in the IBC? I can't remember.
Let me pull it up. 042. Oops, I didn't mean to do that.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that.
I just my specific read, I don't have it memorized in there. So I believe, I guess these could be in the IBC or IRC, but I don't believe that the temporary emergency shelter kind of aligns with the International Residential Code provisions.
Yeah.
And I would think that this is most appropriate as an appendix or something within the International Building Code.
And I guess without trying to get too off topic here, kind of raise the question to everyone. So these two that are mandated, are there opinions on whether these would be more appropriate in the ad hoc, that the ad hoc would get extended to make these kind of considerations? Also anticipating there could be new state law if some of these bills pass this year. Now, we're not considering them yet, but one of them does say the kit homes, if that passed, it says by December, whatever, 31st, 2025. So we would have to do that work this year. So is that best in an ad hoc committee tag that we already have set up? Go ahead, Micah.
I think I would stick with Dustin's recommendation on the location of these two items. The ad hoc, in my opinion, based on the proposal that WABO Technical Code Development Group is getting ready to submit for the multiplex, that is going to take up a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
And that is in addition to the single exit. So I'm not sure that with the timeline shown in the amended schedule or even the current schedule for the ad hoc, that the 2.5 months for that is even going to be adequate, in my opinion. I think we're going to get a lot of the same comments of there's just not enough time for discussion on those vital items. I mean, that's a lot of new stuff that the state is leading on. And so those items are pretty important to try to get right, even if they're not completely right, but close. But I'm concerned about timelines. I think Dustin's recommendation on these two is appropriate. Thanks.
So thank you, Micah. And I think I don't disagree with you at all. But the question, as I was trying to wrap my head around this, was also these mandated ones. There's code development where they're writing code, right? And that is a little different than what we normally ask the tags to do, to review external petitions. Now, obviously, there's amendments that happen in that process, so forth. But maybe the question to everyone is the IBC tag, is that what people signed up for, and are they best positioned to do code writing? So if you remember when we did the single exit tag structure, we specifically said there needs to be a code writer on there. And John Sue's filling that position. Like, it was a perfect example. Like, you need someone actually can write. And so I don't think I'm saying the IBC tag can't handle it, but just, is that the most appropriate, or do we need to expand those ad hocs? And as we got into the weeds on ad hoc tag, which is often the legislature puts it in writing, or we have the different structures of the special committees, the ad hoc committee, so forth. You know, what, in my opinion, in some of those formations, that also allows us the opportunity to go out for outside help, to potentially to contract work, so forth, to help achieve that work and relieve the staff and let them complete the core work of getting the code, the 3-year cycle completed. So lots going on. Okay,
Yes.
go ahead,
And
Dustin. I'll let you
well, just
continue.
one more point, that if we didn't meet the December one and we need to shift for a whole year, there's some other little talked about statutory requirement that, you know, we shall within so many months after the publication of the model code, adopt our revisions to it. So if we don't make December 1, we have some statutory issues that we won't be in compliance with at that point.
Okay. Micah?
Yeah, that's a great one to bring up. Dustin, you're in RCW 1927-031. Again, it's the 30-month window. But I guess in my opinion, I may interpret that a little different, is that you're required to take action on adoption is all you're required to do. So if you say, hey, we're not going to adopt within this 30 months, I think that would meet the, at least intent of that section is to take action. But hopefully we don't get to that point and the council can get all the work done by December 1st. But we'll see how that plays out. But that is a great one to mention. I did want to come back to, if we have a few minutes at some point, about the interim code adoption and errors and omissions and things like that. It's not necessarily an off-cycle rule, but if we have errors and omissions, again, we had issues last code cycle. Those didn't get filed when they were identified, so there's errors, or were errors in the WAC and the Washington codes. But if we don't do that this cycle, again, we're going to be living with errors and enforcing those errors for years to come. So I do think that still needs to be something considered. And unfortunately, yes, we're tight on time, and maybe that isn't going to be great, but that is part of the duties of SBCC. Thanks.
Micah and Dustin, backing out, is that a December 1st, 2025 thing, or is that a before we go to publish this stuff in 2026?
So that would be something that is a line item for the schedule that's not drawn in there. If we're looking at it, I believe it is. Hold on. Me too. Here we are. So because of the delay of our 2021 codes, I think that this was probably crafted more to align with the normal adoption and implementation dates of the codes. But to comply with this one, we would need to start it March 15th and complete 6 months later. And so I've been in talks with ICC about what this might look like as far as publications and what type of timelines they need. I think that the interim code cycle as depicted here, my worry is that if we're doing the interim code adoption cycle, it doesn't say an errata update cycle, this isn't expedited rulemaking, that it opens up the potential for substantive changes if we're doing it. So I'd be happy to not do substantive changes, but that's my worry, is that it opens us up for that.
Yeah, I don't think it does, Dustin. I think that was the change Stoyan got in 1927-031. It states that the interim code adoption cycle is the voting membership has to determine, you can scroll up to it if you want, 031 item 3B. Oh, so I take that back, not 3B. Item 4. It says it's for errors and omissions, eliminate obsolete, conflicting, redundant, or unnecessary regulations. That's what the interim code cycle allows only. It's not substantive changes. So that was a change for that last legislation last year. So the one that we weren't all that happy with, but it did limit the substantive changes during an Arizona missions or other stuff. And it seems like we're already opening this up, at least for consideration on the energy code based on I-2066. I mean, that we're looking at conflicting regulations, right? The initiative says one thing and the code says another. So at least that's some opinions. But I think this could be done if needed, but I don't think we would get into the substantive changes on this. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, well, let's not open that up right now. I think it's good, whether it's a interim or it's emergency, bigger topic. Yeah. Okay, Dustin, kind of maybe moving this along. Are we moving towards what we might potentially prepare for the full council in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, so this is some of the movement that we've talked about. Like right now, we have a energy code residential petition window that we'd like to open up at the next council meeting, holding off for the reports. I was anticipating holding off until the April meeting to open up a submission window. The main consideration is that these reports that we're working on often help color and characterize what the petitions to the amend the code will be. And so we could potentially open up the rest of group 2 codes for petitions at this particular council meeting coming up in March, similar to the group 1 codes, and have it running before the reports are fully complete. But to do that in the same fashion as we did for group 1, I think we would want to have a
Do we just lose Dustin or?
larger window for people. And so that would be one thing that we might change for the council meeting. And then similar for the multiplex, single exit multiplex housing. Roger, as the chair of that tag, is wanting to open up a petition window. Not that we necessarily require petitions for the legislative work, but we think it'll help move that process along. And Roger would like to begin those tag meetings to introduce the task at hand to tag members and make introductions and so forth early in April. And so I would be looking to make some changes to that line for the ad hoc tag meetings as well.
Okay, so I cut out a little bit there, but I think what we're saying here is in both, we're looking at the group 2 normal tags, and then we're gonna grab the so looking at the one where your cursor just was, that council meeting, we need to direct the petitions somehow a blanket direction to the tags so that when they come in, they go straight down, right?
I think we could, so in the group 2, we waited till all the petitions were in, then the council directed them back down to the tag. If we made a motion at the March meeting to direct petitions deemed complete by staff to the tag, we could save that agenda item for the April meeting or June meetings. And tag could begin work on those immediately.
Yeah,
And it's something I'd like to bring to the March meeting is a new policy for staff to use for determining completeness of the proposals.
okay.
So far, that is just visualized at completeness on the form, and using just our limited economic analysis capability, so none of us on staff are economists, and none of us are in the business of doing bids for construction projects. So if we get a economic impact information on the code proposal forms, we can do limited analysis on that and potentially ask for more information. But the main component of what a complete proposal submission is going to look like is completeness on the form. So beyond that, I need to give it some more time and input before I bring a proposal to the council for the March meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that was challenged frequently, but I I'll just give my opinion. It's completeness on the form, and then in its consideration to the tag, and then the only other thing that could be done is um, we don't have to pass. The council doesn't have to pass it straight to the tag. The council could pass it to the committees to do some consideration and just direct that work right up front. That if there's something flagged, a committee could start to do it. You could even, work with the work group on economic impact, so forth, and start doing some things in advance. But we don't want to get too carried away with that. But if that ever became a question and these challenges keep happening at the TAG level and kind of distracting the work, then maybe we need to do something like that. But I think for now, completeness by the staff, streamline it, get it down, start to consider the technical merit, and then the TAG is, in my opinion, has done a good job of also been able to screen to say, hey, there's some question here on the economic analysis part of it, and then that could be also the mechanism to bring it back up to standing committee and start to do some more work
Yes.
right away.
And yeah, and one other consideration for the schedule that's not going to be depicted on the schedule is tag meetings and their frequency and length. We talked about them potentially needing to be longer, but as we begin this work, especially when we're reviewing the petitions for everything going on, there's likely going to be a meeting every day of the week for X, Y, or Z tag. And there will be, I'm anticipating some struggle keeping up with the movement of documents there. I don't know. I really want to work towards getting documents out there as soon as possible after these tag meetings occur so that the updated ones are available. But if stuff is happening on a daily cadence, it is going to become a little harder to get all that out there in the most expeditious manner. So I am anticipating difficulty. I also am hoping that we will meet the mark on that as well. But it just there will be a lot of stuff happening all at once.
Yeah. Okay. That's the list, the bullet list there, right, Dustin? So
We had one more on here for the BFRW schedule. So the main body of work for the BFRW committee coming up next week is to begin some of the work on the International Building Code proposals that were identified for some additional work. Those proposals, I've got two that relate to IBC 504.4.1 for stairway enclosure pressurization increase. Those are number 038 and 113. There are some revisions to those. I'm just using the base numbers for identification of those topics. I have one for petition number 115 has to do with static dampers. This one was identified as needing some additional work, and I believe we got some folks willing to do that one. We have 066, which is a Sound Transit is the proponent of that particular proposal. It affects NFPA 130, and Sound Transit's been in contact with us over the year to talk about potential standardization across the state for light rail fixed. The term is escaping me at the moment, but our light rail stations out there. And then we have the EV charging proposals. We have 068, 122, and 135. Most of those just change different sections within the table, identifying the required amount of charging infrastructure there. So we need to talk about those and identify how we're going to move those through our process. So far, those ones are kind of identified as options that might be put into the CR 102 for consideration by the public. But that was all I was going to have on here for the BFRW, unless there was something identified in the conversation to add to that agenda for next week.
When I was talking to Roger about this, I thought we were kind of converging on having a public hearing at this on all of the flagged proposals. I saw in Roger's email, I think he had something different in mind, and we probably should defer to that, where his suggestion was to take all of them except the embodied carbon at this meeting on next Friday. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes, sir.
and it's a little different than I was talking to a couple of stakeholders. So then that would imply then the following month there would be a dedicated public hearing in that standing committee for the embodied carbon amendment.
Yes.
And then I get it. That makes sense. I think he wants to be there too, and that allows for make sure that we have two larger petitions that are going to want a lot of public input. So at least we're not having the potential we'd run out of time on that first one. So, okay. So does everyone understand that? There'd be a verbal testimony that in the BRFW standing committee next week for all petitions except embodied carbon. The following one would be the embodied carbon. It would open it up for written testimony there to the committee, which is going to make a recommendation to full council. And then everyone needs to remember there's still, when it gets to the full council, there are 2 mandated public hearings that are going to happen in the October timeframe, we believe, right?
Yes, that's the targeted time frame for those hearings, yes.
Yep.
But if the need arises, they may shift a little bit.
Okay. But my point is that the full council still will have a public hearing, but we're trying to do as much work in the standing committee as we can. So there's a firm recommendation on all these coming out of the BRFW standing committee. Go ahead, Micah.
Just a clarification question for you, Todd. Did you indicate that the comments need to be in writing for that?
No, that was just encouragement. That's the word we used at the council. But we're going to have a verbal testimony hearing, and then it's still open then for written testimony after that, because the action would be taken at least a month later from the verbal testimony, I think is the point. And there's time for that before the CR2, before it gets to the council, and the official CR 102 would be filed within 180 days of adoption date. Okay. And then the BRFW will start to direct whatever we can on the economic impact and so forth. Okay. Any other discussion? Thank you, Dustin, on 6, the cycle update.
No, sir.
Okay. WUI code. So on the WUI code discussion, Dustin, did you want to introduce this, or do you?
I would like to.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on it. So, right now the WUI code is identified at in 1927.560. As it currently sits right now, there's no WUI code until the maps are developed by DNR. Local jurisdictions can adopt the model code, and the stance that SBCC has is that we are not empowered to make modifications to that code. So if a local jurisdiction wanted to adopt the model code and modify it, they would not be allowed to, because it affects the residential construction. And so there's an issue there as far as the way it sits. There's current legislation happening right now for HB 1254. Essentially this one, if in its current state, would allow for an option for the SBCC to develop an optional WUI code for adoption by local jurisdictions. The question I have for consideration is, until that bill passes, should the council be working on the WUI code at all? I think that it would be good for the development of the code, even if this bill doesn't pass, to at least begin the discussion. But if it does pass, I would also like to try, and I know we're extremely overloaded. If this one were to slip off of the plate of things we have to do, it wouldn't hurt my feelings too much. But I do feel that development on this code is prudent for the council to begin before those maps, and not necessarily on the maps themselves, but the the building hardening provisions and defensible space. Those seem to be the most contentious parts of the WUI code outside of where the WUI code applies in the maps. So that's the question I wanted to bring up with the WUI code discussion is, should we be working on it right now? in anticipation of this bill passage or just as a way to get ahead of it.
All right, thank you, Dustin. I have an opinion, but let's go to Angela first, please.
So, I mean, I don't have a problem with working on it, but I think Mike has brought up good points before, is that this takes more than, you know, a few months to deal with and work through. And I mean, a lot of the problems with the 21 WUI code that the legislators slapped us for were actually their requirements that they had put on us, which made the code all wonky. But I mean, I guess if there's a group and they want to look at it before the maps, that would be fine. But I think I don't think it should be like thinking that, okay, we're going to put a code into effect for 2024, even if the maps are done. Because I don't think the proper work can be done in this condensed space. So, I mean, if we are going to work on it, I think it needs to be anticipated to be on a much longer timeline. I guess that's all I'm saying. Right.
Yeah, I think that's, go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to say that that is a question I also have, is if we are making development on an optional WUI code, does that mean we're beholden to the other deadlines for the rest of the codes, like December 1, to include it? Does it have to sit through the legislative session and things like that? I haven't had an opportunity to converse with Dirk on that one yet.
Okay. I think these are good questions, and Angela, I think you're right. So go ahead, Angela, first, and then I'll make my comment.
Sorry, I was just gonna comment on the optional code where, I mean, one, I mean, we are showing that we don't have time to do the codes that we have to, and throwing in basically a makeshift thrown together is kind of what it would be, optional code, when they're already allowed to use the ICC base code. I mean, in my opinion, as far as an optional code, I think the base code is where you go. I mean, for that, I just don't think that we could do any justice, and probably would do more harm by trying to, again, throw together something in a really short time period.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking.
No, no, please. That's what we're here for. Okay, so my take on this is we are preparing for a long haul, and we're putting the council and the staff in the best position to respond to the multiple different scenarios that can happen here. There's as is status quo, nothing happens. There's where we think, in my interpretation, that if a local amendment happens, the council doesn't have a lot of say, because the council on certain things are kind of hamstrung, and we've had this debate of whether or not, if there's a local amendment having to do with single or multifamily housing, what's the role of the council when we're not supposed to weigh in on adoption. So I don't want to debate or schedule that, or discuss that right now, but I think what we're doing is, I think it's, in my opinion, responsible that we're forming the tag. That's the actions we're taking right now, is we're populating that tag and having that in position to be ready for multiple different scenarios. I think, obviously we're going to find out really quickly what's going to happen in the legislature. This bill is sitting on the floor or not yet, but it might sit on the floor very soon. We'll know in a week or so if it passes out of the House and starts to go into committees and on the Senate side, and I think we'll kind of understand what our direction might be if we need to engage on that. I think it's also responsible that we look at the 2021 model code and start to do a significant changes report and just understand it, since that is, it has been pretty dynamic, and I think we should be experts and ready to know what's in that code. Because if something like this bill passes, and there are local amendments, we do need to be ready to, with or without an optional adopted appendix, we need to be able to respond to local jurisdictions in their amendments. So anything I say there people disagree with or incorrect? I'm just advocating for, let's keep moving forward, but not, and be ready to pivot.
I think that what you said, it characterizes it nice. I just, as we move forward, looking forward, I would be looking for some direction from the council. Like, should we be embarking on this work? Like, I, I have personal feelings on it that we should be working it, but, that is also contrary to the workload that we've got going on and the ability for us to do it in a meaningful way. Like, just like Angela said, I think that there's large issues, even though the book is the smallest one that we have, it's proving to be a large thorn.
Dave?
I just wanted to let the executive committee know and council know that the DNR steering committee for the mapping has started. I'm one of the representatives for the fire marshals on that particular committee. The schedule that we are working for is June 30th of 2026. So that we also have that date in mind as well, as that's the plan of having the map ready by that time. So the DNR has actually hired a meeting facilitator to take over the reins of running the steering committee, and we've been all given our marching orders at this point for different things to do, but so it is in progress right now, just so that you're aware.
Thank you, Dave. And Dave, since you're, an expert in this area, and can you inform us a little bit about what some local jurisdictions have or already are doing? Who's leading in this kind of effort, and what would happen if the council doesn't do anything for, 6 to 12 months?
A number of jurisdictions have already adopted the model code and are enforcing it. Some are kind of debating what to do with the maps, but in general, there are paths if you have the model code, there's a couple of ways of getting to conformance, and we're ready in Spokane to start using the optional one. We started doing one that just didn't work out very well with the map, but we have another way of doing it. Other jurisdictions, such as Yakima County, have been doing this for years. And I actually have some concerns with the bill. We're trying to talk with the proponent to allow jurisdictions that have already adopted the full model code to keep the full model code, because the way it's written is we'll have to adopt the state amended version, and then we're going to have to go back and amend it back to where we had it before, because we're concerned that there's regional differences that people want to look for. And we're just concerned that we're happy with the model code. We would like to keep the model code, but if we have to go to something less restrictive, then it just takes some of our control away from things. And I know there are a few other jurisdictions. Chelan has also been using the WUI code, and they've been very successful with the things they've done. They've been able to see some very positive things with it. It is a little bit of a challenge of trying to get everybody together to say the same thing, but I think that kind of general answers your general question with that. So there are people that are trying to use this and working with this, and I think everybody's waiting for the map to be done, because a lot of people don't like the map. I don't mind the map. I think the map can be fixed as you're using it, but the map will be finished with some good standards. We're already seeing what other jurisdictions are doing with that. And then just finding out, okay, what is the legislature going to do for direction for the council is how we're going to handle the adoption of the WUI. So that's about where we're at.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on WUI? Any other public comment? I don't think there's action today. Okay. Unless, Dustin, were you looking for action?
No, sir, I wasn't looking for any
Yeah.
specific action. I think, just like you said, the bill's movement will kind of indicate where we should be
Okay.
targeting our efforts.
I guess the question might be, is there anyone opposed to continuing our work on filling out the WUI tag? That's the action we'll take next council meeting. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dustin. Ad hoc tag. We added this. We've had a little bit of discussion already on the ad hoc as related to opening up the window. I think that's the main thing we wanted to talk about here, is that because this is a mandated one, it doesn't have significant changes from an existing code. It doesn't have existing state amendments. So I think it's just a kind of a touch point here where I think, Dustin, you commented it doesn't necessarily require that we open an external petition, but I think it's the right way to be transparent and open about it, to incorporate those. With the single exit, WABO submitted in the IBC, and that was appropriate because it was mandated to be in the IBC. So, and the council pulled that one out and said, bring that to the ad hoc group. So there is a petition sitting there, and presumably, anyone can make an amendment. WABO can make an amendment to it, or someone else could propose other changes or a complete alternative. And so I think that's the intent here, is to open that up for both the single exit and the multiplex. Anyone have any concerns about opening a window and allowing that tag to start work? Anything I missed there, Dustin?
We talked about most of everything, opening the window at the next council meeting. I mentioned that Roger wants to begin work early April. His preference for meeting days is going to be Monday afternoons. And the first meeting is intended to be an intro and kind of planning and setting that tag on the track.
Okay.
And so I think we're looking at like the first week or maybe second week of April.
Okay. Okay. I guess the only other thing to consider as we prepare for the full council meeting is there any council level direction that we feel the tag doesn't have? I mean, the tag has obviously the law, what the law says, but is there any need for the council to give better direction for their work?
Not that I see at the moment.
Okay. Okay. And what is it assumed that BRFW is technically the standing committee over top of those two, since it's the IRC and the IBC? I guess that makes sense, right? And
Yes, sir.
obviously IFC is going to be in there too. So, okay. Okay. We'll close that item then. And then, Ken, we're going to get to your other business in 10 there, but let's go to number 9. Part of our reason to setting this up was to set the full council agenda for now, in this case, 2 weeks from now.
So on this one, so far, we have our items 1 through 4, which is pretty much standard boilerplate for all of our meetings, which is the welcome introductions, the agenda approval, minutes review, and public comment. Then we are going to need some committee reports. We'll have a report from the BFRW, the MVPE, the legislative committee, and the executive committee there. And so that'll be an agenda item. We'll have an agenda item for the proposal windows to be officially opened. And then one thing that's kind of hanging out there, when we were directing the proposals from group 1 to start the CR 102 work, there was a issue raised when we were reviewing the mechanical code that the International Fuel Gas Code was not specifically written out there. So I see it as we need to have a agenda item to refer the International Fuel Gas Code proposals towards CR 102.
Okay.
And outside of those, I don't have other business that I've conceived of at the moment for that council meeting.
Okay. Well, in addition to anything we've talked about today, we do have to, we're going to close the window next week on the site versus source written testimony. So then, we did direct that we're going to take action at that next meeting, right? So that needs to be an agenda item.
And would you like that a little bit earlier in the agenda, or because that's likely going to have a lot of discussion?
Well, discussion, yeah, we're not taking public testimony, remember? So this
Okay,
will be
I'm sorry.
all council action. Go ahead, Jay.
With the legislative committee report, I know Tom's not on the call today, but yesterday we had a significant discussion on some bills that we depending on what happens between now and the council meeting, we may want to actually officially oppose. And so just want to make sure that the agenda would note in those cases that we're taking action and perhaps have a pointer to the bill the bill text that we're looking at.
So-
Not sure if we need to do anything specific on the agenda to take that action versus acknowledge a committee report.
Sounds to me like it doesn't hurt to just have a agenda item that says potential legislative opinion and then put an asterisk by public comment and committee or council action if needed.
Yeah, we'll know a lot more after the cutoff next week.
Yeah, it's just prudent to have that on the agenda during legislative session, I think. That's a good point, Jay. Okay, go ahead, Damon.
Going back to the site versus source, were we getting a presentation from Greg and somebody else on that one?
No, that's what we did last council meeting.
Okay, so now, so we're just boiling it down to discussion now.
Yeah, so if you remember, just and remind everyone, we had the special executive committee for a couple purposes. One, to try to get into this habit of setting up the agenda for the meeting, but also because that specific site versus source question, we wanted to set the format because as anticipated, we took some comments on that, but that was an action we took at the executive committee to say we're going to have a presentation by the proponent or an introduction by the agency, which in this case was Shell representing the tag, right? The council as a sub-agency. And then we opened, I'm sorry, I stand corrected in what I just said. We opened it for written testimony and we directed that we're going to take verbal testimony at that council meeting. So I said the incorrect thing just about 3 minutes ago. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I said the exact opposite of what we're trying to do.
So it is open for public comment.
Yes, unless my memory is wrong. That is what we did. We opened written
that's what I
testimony.
thought.
Angela, tell me what I just said wrong there.
No, I was just gonna say, we said we encouraged written testimony ahead of
Correct.
time by the Friday before the meeting so that council would have a chance to review it. And that, yes, there will be verbal, but anticipating the number of people that might be, that there will be a time limit on testimony to keep it going. So we hope that we said that we hoped that people would submit written, and then if they're going to speak, to simply refer to key points of the written so that we get through it in less than 10 hours. That would be nice.
Right, it's all coming. It's all coming back to me. That's what I meant to say. Thank you. And then the committee and the council action. We don't have to take action, but the intent is that we would. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now that's all clear. And that should be reflected in the minutes, and we'll try to get that's in the minutes, but also are we going to get that posted on the website? I can't remember if that is. We did the I-2066 stuff, right?
Yeah, we got this one on there as well.
I thought so, yeah. And thank you for that.
It's here on the left-hand side, down here at the bottom.
Perfect. Hopefully that's transparent enough to everyone. Okay. And then in that, the date certain there by March 14th, and then that will be posted and or distributed to the council, but
Yeah.
okay. Okay, anything else for the agenda? Go ahead, Ken. Are you commenting on 10 now?
No, I'm
Oh.
just wondering if you're setting the agenda, what happens if you have to have an emergency rule based on what might be talked at the next item, since that emergency rule is expired? And the
Okay.
expedited rule is expired.
Well, let's maybe I think, Ken, it's okay. We'll roll into that, and while we're not we're not formally making a motion to set the agenda. I think it was more of a discussion and a chance for public input. So let's just roll into 10, which includes then this your input on
Yep.
that.
So to speak on this one, in other business, we've got some filings that are still not as updated as they should be. I had a discussion with Damon while he was still chair, and since the council did direct staff to file the stuff in the past, the discussion was that we still should just file those, and that there wasn't necessarily a need for a council meeting to redirect staff to file those. So, to the specific ones that Ken wanted to talk about today, there's the NAFED versus NICET licensing emergency rule and expedited rulemaking that needs to be caught up. Currently, the emergency rule lapsed early in February, and I'm been working to try to audit all of our filings to catch all these, and the focus shifted a little bit before I completed that audit. So the NFA, that one needs to be refiled. I don't see there being a need to have a council meeting on that one to refile. We have the rulemaking that's been done for the expedited rulemaking on that as well. That CR 105 needs to be refiled and then followed through on. Same for the barbecue on the patio rule within the IFC. That one lapsed and needs to be refiled as well. Just to be most transparent, there are a few other filings out there that need to be caught up. The one that comes to mind that hasn't been identified by my audit just yet is the family home child care expedited rulemaking within the IBC and the IFC. I need to get those caught up so that the WAC language in relation to family home child care is consistent across all three codes where it is mentioned. So currently that rulemaking was completed and finalized in the IRC. So the IRC says one thing as far as the definitions in the IBC and IFC, they do not reflect the allowance of up to 16 children within that space. So as far as the NAFED and the barbecue one, I intend to get those emergency filings back on and up to date. And as we do these, I want to start doing a new policy for SBCC staff to send out a gov delivery notice when we do make filings. That way it is clear. And I've been implementing some new tracking stuff for myself to make sure I'm stay current with these filings so that we're not having the whipsawing effect of code requirements becoming effective and then going away. Just it's with the emergency filings, it's especially troublesome because when we make those emergency filings, that language isn't reflected in the WAC online, and so to get the expedited rules done and get that into the WAC, we need to just catch it all up. And so it's been hard to juggle and keep all of it running. So I will commit to getting those out ASAP.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, so the only thing I'm unclear on is that in the November council meeting, the motion that was approved was to start the CR 102 filing, and this is for the NAPED.
It would have been CR 105 filing for the.
Okay, but the motion was CR 102 to make changes to the 21 code.
So I believe that I'd have to go back and review the meeting and then the minutes on that one. But my recollection of the NAFED process is that we made emergency rule to the 2021 codes, and we're going to follow up with expedited rulemaking. I believe that the CR 102 process identified at that November meeting is for the 2024 codes.
Yeah, well, you'll find out that the motion was for the 21 code for CR 102 filings also. Gotcha. So I just, yeah, that's why I just want to bring this up, because we're going to have outstanding issues, and if it's not put on the agenda, we're gonna run into some problems. Thanks.
Gotcha. So if it is a CR 102 that's intended to be filed for the 2021 codes, I'll just have to catch it up, and if there's another CR 102
I guarantee you that was it. I mean, I'm
I'm
listened
not,
to the
I
video
believe
multiple
you.
times.
I believe you. I just it's highlights a different process, and I'll have to maybe talk with Todd about adding that to the agenda for the council meeting if we need to work that a little bit different.
All right, thanks, guys.
Ken, I'm not quite clear, not being inside on this. Are you implying that it was the wrong action, or it was the correct action, and we need to
I
do
have I don't know what was the correct action. All I know is what the motion was to do a CR 102. That was the motion and that's what was approved. And we made sure that the 24 exception changes were included
Okay.
in the 21, and that's what it was to begin the CR 102 process. That's what Roger made the motion for.
Okay. So it sounds to me like, well, oh, go ahead, Ken.
No. I'm just that's what the motion was for.
Okay.
It wasn't to try to do another expedited rulemaking or anything like that. It was just to see our 102 process starting that.
So it sounds like the action today is we'll go do a little more research, and then if needed, add it to the agenda.
Yes, please.
If something needs to be corrected. Okay, thank you. Does that sound right, Dustin? Also, you concur on that?
That's what I'd like to
Okay.
do is I need
Okay.
to research it, make sure that that's what we need to do. If a CR 102 needs to be filed, I'm more than happy to get that happening. But I think that that's not necessarily the correct action, but I will go
Okay.
back, research, and Ken, I'd be happy to talk with you a bit more about this to make sure we're covering the need.
Okay. Noted. Thanks for flagging all that. Okay. What did we forget? Any other business? Okay, hearing none. Thank you everyone for the time. We are adjourned.
You have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.